Metaphor ReFantazio is a game I feel deserves a challenge run on the channel. However, coming up with an idea for one has been a challenge in and of itself. Metaphor is structured in a way that, in my opinion, discourages challenge runs. Most notably, a true solo run of the game is impossible because you can't dismiss party members until you get Juna halfway through the game. On top of that, many creators have resorted to mods in order to get the game to behave how they want. Such as myself, actually. My original idea was to combine the two videos people like seeing from me, challenge runs, and guides about hot fictional women, and ask if you can beat Metaphor ReFantazio with only female party members. This run was shaping up to be great. Until Atlus pushed an update that completely screwed up the mod. So I needed a backup plan. Unfortunately, I was able to find inspiration from another challenge run I did. Can you beat Metaphor ReFantazio as a minimalist? To explain the premise of the mod, I want to clarify something. As proud as I am of my Vengeance Minimalist video, I recognize it wasn't a true minimalist run. It was just a way for me to say, no demon fusion or negotiation. However, when I say Metaphor Minimalist, I truly mean it this time. Side quests? Banned. Shops? Banned. Optional dungeons? Banned. Cooking? Banned. Followers? Banned except for the mandatory ones. Going to the bathroom to raise my luck stat? Banned. Anything else remotely beneficial to me? Banned. The only things allowed are customizing archetypes in academia, items we find in main story dungeons, grinding in main story dungeons, which includes fighting optional enemies like the tutorial dragon, and selling consumable items at shops since that's actually not beneficial to me. And to put in perspective how bad this run will be, the archetypes I'm limited to are Base Seeker, Base Warrior, Base Knight, Base Healer, Brawler, Pugilist, and the entire mage line. Additionally, Heismay will be the only thief, Juna will be the only masked dancer, Yufa the only summoner, and Spoiler as the only berserker. Yeah, it's gonna be one of those runs. Also, since Metaphor is a long game and I want to get this video out ASAP, I'll be splitting it into 2 parts. But don't worry, because each part will be jam-packed with pain. So with that said, let's get into it. After booting up a new game, we're treated to a cutscene where we need to name a legendary hero. We get to name the protagonist properly a bit later, but to let you know, we go with the canon name Will, and name the hero I Will, after that meme that gets me a lot of likes on Twitter. After selecting hard mode and starting the game properly, we get mugged, saved by Best Knight Hulkenberg, and then subjected to the game's amazing OST. Just to let you know, I'm mostly going to be using the Vengeance OST in this video, because Atlus seems to be treating this game's soundtrack like P5s, where you never know what will and won't get copyrighted. That said though, let's see if we can get away with this banger. We make it to the royal capital, meet a woman who we will not be speaking to again, and enlist in the Guard Corps. It's here where we get to name Will, and select our stat growth. I'm going to almost exclusively be investing in strength, as Will's endgame archetype is very physical focused. But then we meet best companion Leon Stroll, and head off to the northern border fort, to fight a human. I know the terminology is a bit weird here, but the big scary monsters in this world are called humans. This will make sense in time. Stroll gets incapacitated, and it seems like all is lost, until we get a sudden burst of determination and awaken to the power of our archetype, and we get ready to face the human. Gorleo is nothing too terrible. Just make sure you heal if you get low, but all in all, this is a simple tutorial fight and is defeated as such. When we come to, we're introduced to Grias, who is definitely not going to die, and get briefed on our true mission, save the ill prince, and avenge the dead king by killing Lucifer. Yup, it turns out Lucy was isekai'd by Moonlight Frostcoon, and was reincarnated as the royal army's disgraced top general, Luis Guiaburn. Let's stroll on board as well. We set off for the next tutorial dungeon. But not before meeting a new friend. Mor, our first new mandatory follower. And while there's a lot I can say, I'll hold off on discussing Mor for now. Just know that he's essentially the Igor or Mito equivalent of this game. Along the way, I grind on every enemy I can, and after Stroll gives a rousing speech, he awakens to his archetype, and we need to fight the reincarnation of Principal Jabba from Persona 5. And no, I'm not saying that because they're both fat, I'm saying that because they're both self-absorbed. Much like Gorleo, Klinger exists as a tutorial fight meant to demonstrate Stroll's new power. Just make sure you guard with low as much as possible and he'll fold in no time. After some more grinding, we reach our first Melancholia Crystal fight against Nerdy Chicken, who will use a colossal almighty attack if your party is in the front row. Fortunately, this attack is very telegraphed, and we take him down in 3 turns. Also, side note, the song that plays for special enemies is such a banger, and it's weird hearing it play for such enemies as Nerdy Chicken, Fish Matador, and Ear Guy. Oh my god. One more room later, and we have a choice to make. Up ahead is a sleeping dragon, who is supposedly really tough for this portion of the game. We can choose to fight it, or head on and do a stealth mission. Since I didn't fight it in my first playthrough, I wanted to correct that mistake here. So let's see how this goes. The dragon is weak to ice, and specializes in fire and slashing attacks. Stroll resists fire and can deal good damage with Diagonal Slash, while Will and Grias can constantly strike its weakness with Bufu. The only thing to watch out for is in the latter portion of the fight, where it will use a powerful AoE move that will target each row of the party. I didn't actually realize this gimmick until way after I beat it, but it doesn't matter too much as I miraculously beat the tutorial dragon on my first attempt ever, and as a reward, we get Stroll's best weapon for most of the game. After escaping the mines, we head to the royal capital in order to attend the king's funeral and kill Luis. But before that, we meet Grias' daughter, Maria. Maria is precious and must be protected at all cost. Then on the day of the funeral, Luis shows up to try to pull a Starscream. However, the king... Wait, what? Yeah, so it turns out the king is sort of alive, I think, and plans to let the people decide their next ruler. However, Grias takes this opportunity to his advantage, and subsequently dies for trying. Wow, who would have saw that coming? But in place of Grias, we add Best Knight Hulkenberg to our ranks, and she awakens to her archetype in time to fight... Grias? Yeah, looks like he's not too happy about being replaced, and has been reanimated to fight us. Zombie Grias is yet another tutorial fight. However, unlike Gorleo and Klinger, he can actually be tricky if you don't manage your turn economy well. What you're supposed to do is draw his aggression with Knight's Proclamation on Hulkenberg, which causes him to target her with a single target skill, instead of an all-target skill on the party. However, the difficulty of this fight comes from the fact that it's also the Synthesis tutorial. Synthesis skills are actions that consume multiple press turns, but these are also some of the strongest attacks in the game. And let me tell you, that X button is looking very, very tempting right now. But this can often lead to situations where Hulkenberg can't use Knight's Proclamation, and... yeah. But either way, it's nothing to put us in too much danger, and soon enough, we send Grias back to the grave. After resting up for the day, we head back in to start the dungeon proper. I then have a very important decision to make, and it revolves around Mor. Mor's follower bond is different from everyone else's, as it's the equivalent to the Velvet Attendant's social links in the Persona games, where we need to do very specific things with archetypes in order to proceed with it. Now you might be wondering, wait, followers are banned, why are you saying this? Well... Mor rank 2 asks us to level up Healer to rank 10. A very simple request if you have the pre-order items like I do. However, doing this has consequences. if you reach rank 10 with Healer, talking to Moore again will automatically rank him up. And this is unavoidable. And since the ability to unlock and customize archetypes via the main menu is unlocked at rank 2, that means Academia and archetypes become inaccessible if Healer ever reaches rank 10. Additionally, Healer being locked at rank 9 also prevents me from learning a very important skill, Dekunda. This is a huge blow, as one of the most notoriously difficult bosses in the game has the ability to debuff me to the minimum, and having no way to remove those debuffs outside of an item that I don't even know if I can get will make the fight even more of a hellscape than it already is. So while I should be fine for part 1 of this challenge, more rank 2 may need to become an exception once we reach that boss, but only as a last resort. But that's still a long way out. For now, we can actually start the final mandatory follower bond, Rin from the hit game Catherine Fullbody, who unlocks and he's a punchy boy, and is actually the only non-mage archetype that we can unlock a second version of, since Rin's first few follower ranks are unlocked through story progression. But onto the dungeon itself, most of the enemies are above the level I need to insta-kill in the overworld, and this is despite being slightly higher level than normal thanks to the tutorial dragon. Over the course of the dungeon, I do eventually reach a high enough level to insta-kill these slightly bigger red wolves and the zombies, but I mostly have to deal with these level 4 baby pups. Why is this important? Well, Will has the ability to use hero passives on any given archetype, which allows certain perks in overworld combat, and Mage's hero passive regenerates 1 MP for the entire party per the amount of overworld enemies defeated. This is as slow as it sounds, but it allows me to sustain myself for longer in dungeons. After progressing a bit in the dungeon, we're met with the first of 2 mini-bosses. One of Luis's soldiers with an army of skeletons. The skeletons hit incredibly hard with physical attacks, and are aided by the soldiers' buff and debuff spam, which Hulkenberg often can't survive. However, having her and Stroll on Warrior allows us to use the AoE round slash on every enemy, which does a good work of cleaning them up. However, it's important to leave one of the skeletons alive, as when alone, the soldier will unleash some devastating attacks. But doing so isn't that much of an issue, and soon enough they both go down. The next mini-bosses are the love children between Gira Makala and Pale Rider's Loas. They repel all forms of physical damage, and blow themselves up with Last Resort after a while. Or at least they're supposed to, but in my 3 attempts I did of this fight, they never used Last Resort once. Which sucks because in this game, Last Resort can't kill you. Only take off a % of your HP. So I begrudgingly take an L, and retool my team to exploit their light weakness. Specifically, I teach Hulkenberg Brawler, so she can use the Fizz Light Synthesis skill that deals a crap ton of damage to them. With these changes though, I do need to reset once, because I get unlucky with status effects, but regardless, I'm able to beat them with an unscathed triumph. Now that the path is clear, we head to the elevator and... Wow, I actually forgot about these guys. Despite their shockingly high damage, the strategy is actually the same as Zombie Grias. Spam Knight's Proclamation on Hulkenberg to stop them from using their AoE options. Something made even easier now thanks to the Buffer's Pierce weakness, meaning we can use Synthesis to hit his weakness and not lose turns. And once we have the strategy going, they are promptly defeated. Now that we're at the top of the cathedral, I take some time to grind to get my MP back, before we confront the mastermind behind this operation.
Well, what do we have here? A bunch of Redditors to ratio my efforts. What? Lord Luis, the Supreme Rizzler, promised me unlimited gyats. This is hard, you know that. Promised me unlimited gyats if I could get him the Royal Scepter. But unfortunately, the giant Discord mod in the sky caught me acting sus and took it away to Ohio.
Is he broken? I believe he's broken.
And now I find you dream stands trying to edge on my mewing streak.
I don't even think that's what edging means.
And now it's time for you to join William Afton as Freddy Fazbear's. It's Zorban time!
Zorba is a boss I struggled with on my first playthrough. He uses his body's despair. And these bodies are annoying because they hit hard with punches and take a lot of punishment. And the more damage we put on them is less damage we put on Zorba. Zorba himself has no weakness and resists all magic except for light, making physical the best play. Now, I initially went in underleveled as a scouting attempt with no thought that I could actually beat him. However, out of nowhere, this happens. Yup, Giga Stroll crit Zorba with a synthesis skill that took off most of his health. And a couple actions later, I finished him off. A boss who took me a solid hour and multiple deaths on my first playthrough only took a few retries on one attempt to beat. And under level no less. And I expect the next boss to fall just as easily, since I was able to beat him on my first try with only one reset on my first playthrough. But unfortunately, no. Homo Eggman packs a meatier punch than he has any right to. Hamon can take off most of a party member's HP, and I have no items to cure Forget. The main goal of the fight is to take out the shell so the heart can be easily exposed. Cracking the shell is really easy, but what's difficult is knocking it out on one turn to avoid taking damage. After the first time of doing this, he'll summon little minions who will deal big almighty damage if I'm not in the back row and guarding. The first time he does this is unavoidable, but the second time this happens, Gallica will take off most of their HP and make them easier prey. From there, it's just a matter of looping the shell and striking at the heart, and soon enough, we turn them into scrambled eggs. With plenty of time to spare before our next deadline, we prepare to do nothing. What, you saw the rules of this challenge, you know what you're in for. Nothing but Will, Gallica, and the sweet comfort of my bed.
Did you know? The world you dream of is nothing but a fantasy. The book you covet so dearly speaks of an ideal society. A utopia where all who live within are equal. But that world was anything but. In truth, the denizens of that world knew nothing but conflict and strife. Subjugated by order falling to chaos, and then chaos once again leading to order. This is the cycle that doomed that failed world. But this one may yet have a chance. You have the power to reshape it to your will. Benevolence or malevolence. Harmony or discord. That decision is yours to make. One last parting gift for you. A warning to heed on your travels. Beware the ice-bound menace, whose frozen breath will freeze your marrow.
In light of recent developments, the church decided that the best way to proceed is a totally 100% not rigged tournament in order to see who's most worthy for the throne. The first trial of this tournament is to slay the biggest monster around and present their heads at an exhibition. With news of this development, we enter the tournament with the goal to present a head of a different kind of monster. Not that of a beast or human, but of a kidnapper terrorizing the local castle town of Martira. However, first we must attend the opening ceremony. A song by Best Girl Juna starts off the ceremony, and we are introduced to the other candidates. The Pope's sidekick, a drag queen, kid named Roger, and filling in as Luis's proxy, the biggest tool in the game, Glodell. We then get introduced to our mobile base of operations, the Gauntlet Runner, as well as its various features. Only 2 of which we will be using, and one of them is the bed. There's also Neurus, who's a pretty cool character, but is most notable for what he does in the final dungeon, so I'll save that for part 2. Also, while on our journey, I made a discovery.
Alright.
Yeah, I completely forgot about these scripted virtue events, so add any mandatory gain of virtues as exceptions. Also, funnily enough, I actually got to rank 2 wisdom just by doing the first 2 events on the road. And literally nothing else. After a couple days, we see a skirmish between Glodell and the Pope's sidekick, and we fight the latter to reinforce how much of a loser Glodell is. Because of the royal magic, we can't physically harm Robin, so we need to take out his 2 lackeys. The fizz-leaning one is weak to ice, so we exploit that fact to generate press turns off him. The mage of the group though is only neutral to our attacks, so he's more annoying to take down. All in all, the encounter is pretty straightforward, but I do need to reset a few times because if I get damaged even slightly, it's probable that I'll just die. But I'll take that over Watson spamming the same voice line over and over. Glodell gets dunked on, and we make a good first impression on Luis. Although it will take some time before we can officially join his ranks, which we need to do in order to find the prince's cure. But right now we need to deal with the kidnapper. After arriving in Martira and getting treated to one of the meals of all time, Best Guard Lieutenant Morris tells us that the kidnapper is in an abandoned wasteland, and we should head there when the local sandworms are asleep, which should happen in a few days. Once that day comes, we get into a minor skirmish with Rin, and we get her to rank 2. And upon reaching the cave where the kidnapper is, we see that Morris was full of shit, and the biggest sandworm of them all is wide awake, and oh my god! I knew I was grossly underleveled for this, but I was not expecting the worm to legit pull a Chadsma special and almighty spam me to death. Essentially, if the worm ever goes for an AoE option, I'm just dead. There is no way around it. Especially since I don't have any revive items, and won't for a good while. Eventually, I am able to brute force the fight, and we get swallowed and have to, and I quote, get to the anus in order to escape. Inside the beast is a lot of useful goodies that I make sure to grab, but also a lot of encounters that are way above my level. However, I need to fight them to get some kind of edge. But the thing is... yeah. And unfortunately, if we die, we're sent right back to the start of the section. Normally the game is very generous with autosaves, but this area is the exception, so I have to be extremely careful. However, I can't be because I'm walled by a tapeworm. The tapeworm is weak to elec, and the viruses it summons are weak to ice. It's imperative that we either take care of the tapeworm in 2 turns, or get lucky with forget procs. Because if he's allowed to summon his buddies... However, many resets go by, and I am not getting any luck. That is until I finally get the RNG I was hoping for, and take out the worm, and with a bit more struggle, the viruses go down too. After getting to the anus, we navigate a cave, and we meet the supposed kidnapper, Heismay, former Shadow Guard and Master of Agility. Heismay tries to take advantage of my innate gullibility by stealing the gimmick of Black Noir Angyoki from Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne. However, as a certified SMT player, I was able to see past this blatant copyright infringement and take him down swiftly. By the way, this is not the last time a boss's gimmick is straight up plagiarized from Nocturne. We then learned that Heismay is not in fact the kidnapper, and after one more fight that goes exactly the same way, we take him back to Martira to expose Morse for his bullshit. Morse flees, begins his Joker arc, and Heismay awakens to his archetype in retaliation. After fending off a pack of wolves, we flee and... Wait, Heismay rank 1 is scripted? I thought it wasn't. Well, this revelation is the ultimate blessing for the next dungeon. Most things here are overleveled, and will kill us in 1 or 2 turns if we're not careful. However, having Thief on every party member changes the way we go about things. Not only does it have great skills for this point in the game, but its hero passive, Pickpocket, has a high chance for an enemy to drop an item upon being stunned or taken out in the overworld. Normally, the Merchant archetype is the better one to do this because of the passive skill Lucky Find, but obviously we cannot get Merchant, so this is the next best thing. And I make great use of this, grinding from level 19 to 27 throughout my time here, and gaining 98 200 damage fire items and over 70 Raccoonda items. But within the dungeon itself, we learned that the true culprit behind the kidnappings was a giant human who was adopted by the town's mayor, Joanna, who took it in after losing her own half-breed child to racial prejudices. The human, however, required food, and Joanna provided by feeding the people of Martira to the beast. Heismay was framed for the crimes because Moors noticed him while scouting one day, and figured a lesser tribesman would be the perfect scapegoat. The story of Joanna and Martira is a tragic one, and I highly recommend playing the game for yourself to get the full details. But for now, in the immortal words of Werner Herzog,
I would like to see the baby.
Homo Grogu is another boss I struggled with on my first playthrough. So much so that I am not ashamed to admit that I had to turn down the difficulty for him. Granted, I was level 23 at the time, but now I'm level 27 and turning down the difficulty is unnecessary. But as for the fight itself, its difficulty is determined by how much Grogu uses Deafening Din. Deafening Din is a powerful all-target Fizz Almighty attack that lowers defense on hit. In my first playthrough, he did nothing but spam this move, and it led to several game overs. But this time, I got extremely lucky and he only used it twice, both times being non-consecutive. Beyond that, he also has a single target Fizz Almighty attack, a skill that can inflict daze, which tanks our accuracy, and he'll eventually build up to a turn where he uses an all-target physical attack called Jumping Playtime, which feels weaker than Deafening Din, but I'll have to ask CTOBN on the specifics. As for the strategy, I keep everyone in the vanguard to mitigate damage, and spend the first part of the fight spamming lava crystals. The best part about item spam for this fight is that items are always 100% accurate, meaning that Daze is effectively useless, and he actually wastes his first 2 full turns casting this move, so we take advantage of that to deal great damage. I also want to mention that Hulkenberg mastered the Knight archetype, which now gives her access to a strike attack that lowers accuracy on hit, and this gives me a higher chance of dodging Deafening Din and Jumping Playtime. Once Grogu gets low, Joanna will heal it back to around half HP, but this isn't an issue for us, and eventually, I redeem myself for my first playthrough and beat Grogu on my first attempt without any resets. We pull a change of heart on Joanna, and she agrees to confess her crimes at the upcoming exhibition. We sit around and wait before heading to the exhibition, which is located in the beautiful capital of Oceania, Brylehaven. On our way there, we encounter Rin again, and defeat her to unlock Once the day of the exhibition comes, we're formally introduced to Saint Rella. For better or for worse, she'll become relevant later. And we see that the competition is steep. Glodell bought a human head, which Louis probably killed himself, and the Pope killed a sea monster terrorizing Brylehaven. However, while their heads may be bigger, ours is heavier, as Joanna confesses her crimes and is executed on the spot. But not before we say the funny.
I will.
He's in, boys! He did it! He said it!
Our gambit turns out to be successful in drawing Luis's attention, who personally invites us to join his ranks. After passing a test with his lieutenants, Fidelio and Basilio, he welcomes us by answering a question of our choice. The game gives you 3 options, one of which being a funny one about Juna. But I have a different question in mind.
So, Zorba, Why is he like that?
All this way, and you'd rather ask about one of my subordinates? Very well then. When I recruit someone, I care not for their tribe, heritage, or social class. Only their merit and resolve to fulfill their vision. If you have the strength of will to see your ideals achieved, you are more than welcome in my ranks. And Zorba demonstrated that better than anyone.
No, we mean why did he talk the way he did?
Oh, I have no idea. We had the Caradrius' best doctors look at him, and they could only conclude it was brain rot. I do not know how he got it, but at least it's not contagious. Still irritating to listen to, though.
I heard that.
What was?
You heard nothing.
With that out of the way, Luis wants to invite us to a party to formally introduce us to his ranks. In 20 days. You'll see why this is obnoxious later, but for now we need to focus on our current objective, breaking into Luis's private quarters to steal the formula. But to do that, we need 4 different keycards from 4 different guard captains. The Caradrius is a unique dungeon for a number of reasons. First, it's the only dungeon that can be done at night as well as during the day. Something I will not be making use of as I'm planning on knocking it out in one sitting. Also, the guard captains are the only real fights here. As for the rest of the dungeon... Yup, the game turns into Metal Gear Solid. Medieval Gear Solid, if you will. And while I haven't played MGS, I'm quite experienced with stealth through the Batman Arkham games. So using those skills, I'm effortlessly able to knock out all the guards. Now onto the guard captains. The first one is Haru Okumura. She specializes in physical attacks, but is very susceptible to status effects. The only status moves I have are Dark Sword Gaming, and an item that inflicts charm. The fight takes a few tries, because I need to find a strategy to defeat the captains in 3 turns or less, another unique gimmick of the dungeon. But eventually, I decide to inflict Haru with another, different status effect. Metaphor has a subset of skills that can inflict a temporary weakness onto a character. The best version of these moves come from archetypes I can't get, but Knight does have a synthesis skill called Hammer of Justice that inflicts a one-time pierce weakness, and using this synthesis repeatedly will keep that weakness fresh. So on my first action, I inflict Haru with either Forget or Charm, and then go all in on Hammer Spam, and she eventually falls over. For our next captain, we actually have a choice on who we get to fight. The first one is Glecom, who adopts the same strategy as Grogu, try to inflict daze and spam physical attacks. But the other option, Siba, has a gimmick that makes him easier prey. You foolish children are no match for a real mage's power. Behold, Tetrakarn!
Good strategy there. Unfortunately, Tetra Break!
Tetra what?
How about this?
Our final captain is Junastan 469, who gets help from Sigmire of Katarina. And oh boy, these guys are no joke. Sigmire pulls another Chatsnama and spams Almighty, while JS469 tries to pick us off with physical attacks. Sigmire is weak to Pierce, and JS469 is weak to Elec. But the thing is, there are multiple other factors to track. First, we need to maximize our dodge chance so they'll waste their turns. But then we need to deal with our damage taken and damage output. Stroll is on Brawler to ensure that we can use Knight's Pierce-based synthesis skills, for which there are 2. The aforementioned Hammer of Justice, and Jump Thrust, which lowers defense by 1 rank. Finally, we need to ensure that Sigmire is taken out on turn 2, and JS469 is taken out on turn 3, since he has less health. On my winning attempt, Will got a lucky dodge on turn 1, preventing JS469 from acting. Heismay then uses Jump Thrust on Sigmire to get his defense lowered, Stroll then heals, Hulkenberg decreases evasion, and then Heismay lands a crit with Hammer of Justice on JS469, which allows Stroll to act again by throwing a lava crystal. Next turn, the party go all in with hammering Sigmire, and we eventually finish him off with 2 lava crystals, and then we spam hammers on JS469 to take him out. With access to Luis's quarters, we need to wait until the night of the party to obtain the formula while everyone is away. Which is in 19 days, the second longest deadline period in the game. So after 13 minutes of going to sleep, we head out for the party. Things initially go well until the Grias has an unscheduled takeoff that throws everyone into a frenzy. After a section whose tutorial is so bad it would make Xenoblade 2 blush, we make it to Luis's quarters, but find someone else there. Juna. It turns out she's a double agent and wants to help us retrieve the formula. Unfortunately, Glodell wants to be a snitch and takes Juna hostage. Now the Glodell fight is typically pretty easy.
No! Isn't there anything we can do?
I'm sorry, everyone.
What? This part isn't scripted? Yeah, so it turns out with my level deficit, Hector can kill me before the cutscene trigger, and there is literally nothing I can do about it. What's worse is that after switching to Knight to resist his attacks, the game does something truly disgusting by either making his attacks almighty, or silently unequipping my archetype. I don't know which, but both effectively mean that I'm soft-locked and the challenge is impossible. So if you like what you saw here, consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. Okay. So for this one instance, I'm going to switch the difficulty from hard to normal, and switch it right back after beating Glodell. Hi, Editor Jeff here. So it turns out something I could have done was moving Will to the back row, which would have cut the damage a bit. I did not think to do this at the time, but either way, we're gonna pretend like this didn't happen. Okay? Cool. After surviving the dog check, Juno awakens to her archetype, and we fight Glodell properly. Glodell focuses on supporting Hector while occasionally throwing out weak ice magic. Hector meanwhile spams physical attacks. Glodell is weak to light, and Hector is weak to force. But thanks to Juno's archetype, Masked Dancer, we can implant a weakness to fire, ice, or Mudo. This will come in extremely handy later, but while it's just me and Juna, these skills aren't ideal. Despite the lower difficulty, Glodell still hits me pretty hard due to my low level, but Juno wears him down, and he eventually gamer rages and dies out of frustration. This is a blessing in disguise though, as now he can be our scapegoat. Rest in peace, Glodell. While my respect for you has increased, it has only done so marginally. After what the game will now affectionately call the Glodell incident, Basilio, but especially Fidelio, are distrustful of us. So much so that they accompany us for our next mission. A thinly veiled excuse by the church to perform cultural appropriation. Luis wants to get a special lance called Dracodios, which contains the power to bypass the king's magic and will allow him to kill the pope. Nearest preps the gauntlet runner for sailing, which is a thing he can do apparently. But our voyage is interrupted by a surprise boss fight against Squidward tentacles, who it turns out the pope did not kill. I have almost 3 hours of footage of me dying to Squidward. That should tell you how brutal this fight is. Squidward is level 39, so we are taking this at a near 10 level deficit. His toolkit includes a weak ice attack, a decently strong strike attack, and the main thing to watch out for, Random Strike, which hits multiple times with the power and number of hits increasing the more tentacles are alive. My original plan was to spam the Zeodyne synthesis on the main body, as it's weak to Elec. But yeah, that didn't work. I then tried switching to a more powerful synthesis called Skyfall Bolt, but yeah, that also didn't work. It's also worth mentioning that I have no way to decrease Squidward's attack, only his defense and agility, but keeping up these debuffs is really hard because of Random Strike's high damage. I tried the fight again, and again, and again, reset after reset, but I am making no progress. Eventually, I decide to do something that I didn't think I'd have to do for a while. Engage with the boss's gimmick. Instead of hitting him with a single target spell, I need to use Mazionga to hit both Squidward and his tentacles. To that end, I put Stroll on Mage to enable that synthesis, while also changing Juno's mask from Seeker to Knight. This enables her to use shield arts alongside Hulkenberg to keep up the accuracy debuffs. And as for Hulkenberg herself, I inherit Strike Dodge from Brawler, which gives her a higher chance of dodging Random Strike. With all these changes, I'm able to bring all the tentacles down, which has the positive effect of increasing the damage the main body takes. However, don't think the fight from here is free, as... Wow, I got so far, but still died. Ugh. A few attempts later, and I once again get rid of all the tentacles, but this time Squidward doesn't get a BS crit, and with a Skyfall Bolt, I am finally able to send him back to Bikini Bottom. My god, that was rough. But I'm glad that this is definitely the last time we will be seeing him. The next day, our good buddy Fidelio gives us a gold tier item that increases all our stats by 5. You know, for someone who supposedly hates us, that was very kind of you, Del. But the day after, we make it to Verga Island, where Draco Dios is being held. Shortly after our arrival, the heat becomes too much, and we take a dip in a local spring. Said spring turns out to be the island priestess's holy bathwater, and we get promptly arrested for trespassing. Fidelio and Basilio manage to break us out, and we quickly earn the islanders' trust by saving their chief, who explains their situation. It turns out that the chief, named Ideni, and the priestess are brother and sister, and it's tradition for the priestess to sacrifice herself to appease the island's dragon god, Et. Ideni, however, had a last-second change of heart and set off to stop his sister, but got injured in the process. So we promise to get her back, and by doing that, we'll deem ourselves worthy of Draco Dios. And in order to accomplish that, we need to go through what is probably the longest dungeon in the game. Welcome one and all to the Dragon Temple, where everything is overleveled and is trying to kill me. Okay, I'm sorry, rant time. Grinding in this place is a miserable experience. Will often needs upwards of 6,000 EXP to level up, and we only earn about 150 to 300 EXP per random encounter. Divided out, that's anywhere from 20 to 40 battles I need for Will to gain a single level. And like I mentioned, everything here is overleveled and is trying to kill me. And trust me when I say it's only going to get worse from here. But after making it through a pretty easy maze, we meet the priestess, Yufa, and she takes us to a very interesting location.
Finally, we have made it down to where the Magla is the strongest in the Dragon Temple. The lost city of...
No way! Is that SMT4?
What? No, it's Etrian Odyssey.
Etrian what?
You know, Etrian Odyssey? The critically acclaimed 2D dungeon crawler series which sold 1.5 million copies worldwide.
Huh. Strange that I've never heard of it then.
Well, maybe if this video gets at least 15,000 views, Jaffinator will cover it.
What are you talking about? Who's Jaffinator?
Oh, don't mind me. We Mustari have a special relationship with the Fourth Wall.
The fourth what?
And now that we've arrived at Lost Shinjuku, the real work begins. I need to grind from level 31 to somewhere in the upper 40s. This is because this is the last dungeon we can visit before one of the most notoriously difficult bosses in the game, who will completely wreck us if we are particularly low level. And like I stated, grinding in this place makes grinding in Nocturne look like grinding in SMT5. And for more context, it took me almost 10 hours of grinding to reach the point I needed. And I really couldn't get things going until I reached level 41, when I can grind on these 2 Melancholia crystals without consequences. Doing this made me want to pull my hair out, and I didn't even record most of the grinding because I didn't want to bloat my hard drive. There was even a boss fight against Homo Ear Guy that I didn't record just because he blended in with the rest of the grinding. Just know he wasn't particularly noteworthy, but at the end of the day, I'm able to get to a respectable level 46 and have a full stock of Magla pills and half a stock of Hero Leaves of Light. But regardless, we take our newfound determination and set out for our next bosses. And yes, I do mean bosses. As expected, we need to fight the dragon god Et. However, he's being controlled by a human, Homo Harley Quinn. The goal of the fight is to knock out Harley to make Et more manageable. Something very easy to accomplish thanks to Yufa being able to hit both Harley's weakness and Et for consistently good damage. It's also a good idea to use as many debuffing skills as possible, as Et is highly likely to use Daikunda and then buff himself, which effectively means wasted turns. This strategy works until Harley siphons HP from Et, which causes Et to start trying. But fortunately, recovery is easy, and we're able to purify the Dragon God and obtain Dracodios. Yufa reinforces her newfound resolve, and we notice that Harley managed to escape and is terrorizing Verga Island. And with Basilio and Fidelio getting the villagers to safety, we have enough space to face Harley by herself. I've seen people say Harley is a pretty hard fight, but I've always found her to be the easiest in the entire game. Harley decides to take notes from Heismay earlier, and plagiarize a boss from Nocturne. This time, she steals Noah's weakness cycling gimmick, where she nullifies everything except for the opposite of the color she's glowing. So if she's glowing blue, that means she's vulnerable to fire, and when she's red, that means she's vulnerable to ice. Technically, she can also be vulnerable to Electric Wind too, but there is no reason the fight should last beyond the second rotation, especially since Juna can implant a weakness to just bypass the gimmick altogether. And soon enough, Yufa shows Harley why plagiarism cost her the fight. The villagers rejoice, and we come up with a plan to kill Luis with Dracodios. What is that plan? Well, I think that's a question that can wait until part 2. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and if you like what you saw here, consider liking, commenting, and subscribing to help build a community. And a very special thank you to all my voice actors, T for the renders, and a special thank you to Robin for various graphical edits. Until next time, this is Jaffinator, signing off.